Well, today on the Redacted Culture Cast, it's white dudes, beards, and tattoos. I've got Ian Strimbeck here from RuneNation. And now that I've introduced yourself, would you please explain why that's relevant?
It's why it's relevant because that's pretty much how I guess how both of us look, and that's kind of the culture that we're in here within the gun world. It's kind of a commonality of having high amounts of ink inside of your skin, and facial hair is always a cool thing because shaving is lame. So
shaving is lame, but shaving the real question is, but does shaving make you weak?
Man, I honestly was super big into the whole old school grooming and shaving for a bit when I was in college. I actually wrote my senior thesis paper on the not revolution, but the revisioning of old school grooming, whether it be traditional grease-based or oil-based pomades and the old Badger brush with the making your own shave soap. And I actually had my own straight razor and the strop that you get out all the dullness out of and resharpen it. So I was completely into it. And then I realized that growing a beard's way easier.
Growing a beard's way easier. It allows the man to focus on the more important things of life, which is one thing that I do enjoy about your content, is that I know you're an instructor, but would you mind, you want to plug any of your stuff so that people
Sure, yeah.
can find you ahead of time?
Yeah. My name's Ian Strimbeck. I'm the owner and founder of RuneNation. Spent some time in the Marine Corps from 2006 to 2010, more specifically in the infantry realm. I was stationed and was with 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. Within those 4 years, I held every position of fire team, ranging from team leader, point man, grenadier, saw gunner. Spent some time overseas in the Al-Anbar province of Iraq from 2007, 2008. And then in all of 2009, from spring to winter, I was all over the Mediterranean. I think, if I remember correctly, with the 26th MEU. We kind of were the QRF for the Mediterranean area. And then in 2010, I said I'm all set with this, and went through the lovely process of exiting the military, which is, if anybody's unfamiliar, if you want to re-enlist, they will hold your hand and pretty much give you anything that you want. But if you want to exit, it's pretty much, here's a checklist, figure out on your own, see you later. And you're pretty much left with figuring out how and where to get certain things signed off and checked off. And it's definitely not a quick process, let's just say that. But either way, I decided to leave in 2010. Went back home, and unfortunately my home at the time, I was born in the, as I joke, the draconian and communist state of Massachusetts. And when I went back home, I ended up using my GI Bill and was at Salem State University in Salem, Massachusetts, and ended up with my bachelor's in communication with a concentration in journalism and a minor in psychology. And while I was in college, I also started getting my feet, we'll say, quote unquote, air quotes here, getting my feet wet teaching within the private sector. If anybody is familiar with the laws in Massachusetts, they're very similar to the lovely laws in New York or New Jersey or California, where you basically have to jump through hoops of fire to obtain your license to carry and or possess firearms. So the class that I helped teach was what's called the BFC, or the Basic Firearms class. I jokingly say it's death by PowerPoint for 6 to 8 hours. It essentially allows people to get physically hands-on different types of firearms, single action revolver, double action revolver, single action pistol, double action, single action pistol, et cetera, so forth, so on. Give them dummy caps, have them load the magazine, load the cylinder, whatever. And it's, again, a check in the box for the state to go, see, this person did this, and, it's just more money you're paying back to the state, essentially. It really has no training value. Like, for that class, you don't have to do any live fire whatsoever, which is terrifying to think, but again, that's what happens with state mandated training, which is why I'm not a fan of any state mandated training, because it's always indoctrinated, and by the time it gets through the process of the government, it's so far behind that it has no correlation to what we're trying to get out of this, which most people are trying to get that to concealed carry a firearm. But either way, did that. And then, of course, I also worked for an executive protection firm out of the greater Boston area. We worked alongside international dignitaries such as the Dalai Lama, or when celebrities and VIPs were visiting the Boston area. Worked alongside Army CID, Boston State Police, the State Department DSS service, and that was an interesting field to be in. Definitely nothing in comparison to OCONUS executive protection work. When working in the city, you're unfortunately more or less a glorified security guard that wears a suit, and usually the principal or the individual you're protecting looks at you as more of a nuisance than what you're trying to provide, which is to make sure themselves and their family are secure from all the crazies that are out there, which we've already talked about before we started. And then, of course, I also did or worked your very stereotypical door work at really less than desirable bars in less than desirable areas of Boston. And that really opened my eyes to the normalcy of everyday criminal interaction, how fast and how violent things can become in really small and compromised spaces. And from there, in 2014, I moved up to New Hampshire, which is where I now reside. And I was still working under another locally based training company in New Hampshire, kind of teaching on the side whenever I could, still doing a full-time job that I hated. But as we all know, sometimes we have to do what we need to do to put food on the table for the family, regardless how we feel about the job. And then finally in 2017, I said, screw it, I'll do it myself, and jumped out into the black void of the unknown and left behind and walked away from job security, insurance, with a mortgage, 3 kids and a wife over my head. And I've been teaching ever since. So this coming May will mark 6 years I've been doing this full time. I teach between 40 to 42 seminars a year. Usually I start in February. My last one's usually around December. And what I teach is pretty much anything revolving around the realm of self-preservation, whether it deals with a handgun, a rifle, even combatives. I've been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now for almost 11 years. It's a big part of my life. I'd say even probably a larger part of my life than actually pulling the trigger and teaching people how to pull the trigger. Before we actually jump on this podcast, I was just at Jiu-Jitsu for the noon class. So it's something that I really not push, but I really encourage people to try if their body is able to. Male, female, big, strong, doesn't really matter. It matters putting your time on the mats and getting a, as I joke and say, good dose of humble sauce, a couple times a week to really put things in perspective. And I guess that kind of sums it all up.
Well, it's quite a summary, and there's a lot to unpack there. As far as there's a number of reasons why I wanted to talk to you. You and I have actually we've known each other for a while. So I hope I don't lose anybody in the context of our conversations. But I want to kind of step in a little bit. First of all, I definitely understand the experience of getting out of the military and just basically being given a checklist and being like, okay, cool. Well, do this thing, do this thing, yep. Go to this course where they tell you how to make a resume and all this other kind of stuff. And to be clear, here's the sad part is what would you expect from the military? Are you going to have somebody who's never gotten out of the military tell you how to get out of the military? No, my first sergeant's not going to be able to help me at all because he's never done it. No,
and if anything, they're going to tell you that you shouldn't get out. I've had plenty of people when I was in the process getting out that said, you'll regret it. The grass isn't greener on the other side. You'll be back, etc. So that's really sick.
Yeah. I mean, there's that. And then there's they hired civilians, and everybody knows how the military works. And when it comes to civilians is that they're usually gathering people from around the base and those people are the kind of people that typically don't have any other value to add. Or are not presenting any other value. So, they're like, oh yeah, I'm an administrative assistant. I basically help people transition out of the military, and I'm sure there's some really good people that may try to fill that role, but it's the general experience from people who've gotten out of the military is definitely the advice that you're given is either so generic it's not useful, or it's what do you honestly expect? Because I mean, if you're like a billionaire CEO, you're not going to tour around the country teaching about to be veterans how to like live in the real world, because there's like 7 of you that there's like, you know, I think maybe 10% of this population really of the American population really knows how to like kind of swim in the ocean. The other 90% of us are on different levels of like either incompetent to like just struggling.
Yeah.
So,
and I honestly think it's because people really don't understand how the military works. The military, for the most part, always works for the lowest bidder. So again, the people that they're hiring on to do these classes, they're quite literally, you know, getting paid the lowest bidder. So they're probably going to put the lowest effort into giving you all of the quote unquote necessary or essentials to exit the military successfully.
And what the military is very good at is metrics. We know. You're playing a big numbers game, but there is a very hard difficulty, and this is giving them grace in the sense of it's very hard to determine what the metrics are. What is the metric of success for veterans getting out of the military? Like, is it not committing suicide in the first 6 months? Because that's not optimistic. Or is it like they attended the class, he knows how to make a resume, he has a like, you know. Your medical information is there. You have a packet. And meanwhile you're like, okay, I'm sorry. Let's just say you're a battalion commander. You're focusing on the next rotation, the next deployment, the next promotion, the next something. So that guy who's getting out of the military is unfortunately probably low on the totem pole of like urgent responsibilities, or urgent, the low on the urgency scale, compared to like, okay, we're going on another deployment in 2 months, or Private Cooper or Sergeant Cooper is getting out of the military. This is the deployment is much more important to the battalion. So I think in some sense, veterans get a little selfish on their way out, and it happens, man.
Oh yeah, no, I was super jaded when I left the military. You know, grew my hair out, wore tie-dye shirts. You know, wanted no relationship or record with the military. You know, I never even brought being in the military up to people that I was just meeting when I first got out of the military. That was like the last thing to bring up. Not that I was ashamed of it, but I just felt like it brought no positive benefit to the conversation other than the infamous and always loved "thank you for your service" from people who you know, are trying to do as best they can to try to find a way to relate to you. I guess like I obviously never would ever shame somebody for saying that, but I also because I understand that it's really the only way that people who have never served can try to kind of, I guess, bring those two walks of life together by having some type of sentiment, and that sentiment being the thank you for your service. And I know that they're not meaning it facetiously. If anything, I know that they're trying to be as honest as they can be given the situation.
The bridging the gap between the veteran and society has always been a struggle to kind of make sense of, because on the one hand, at least this is how I've seen it, on the one hand, you have this problem where I think veterans, in some ways, they just like when you call someone a veteran, even so, they want to be understood to some extent. I think there are definitely people who like they enjoy the sort of mystique of being no one can understand me because I saw things, and like, okay,
oh, for sure,
I get it. That's
the dysfunctional vet that we, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, I've had enough conversations about this. Like, I definitely think that there are veterans who milk it, and don't get me wrong, like that exists. We know it. You know, it's the same thing. Like, it's the same thing. There's a difference between somebody who comes onto hard times and uses welfare to get out of it, and the person who never really came onto hard times, just literally never made a good decision in their life, and they've just built an entire life of rolling from welfare to welfare to welfare to welfare. They're not the same person. So like, regardless of what you think about the welfare state, whether it's a good thing, a bad thing, a net positive, net negative, there's a difference between there's a difference between the people that social safety net prevents from catastrophe, and there are people who that social safety net becomes their bed and they just live in it. And and veterans are no different, where some of us will get out of the military and our entire military career will be the platoon turd and the underachiever, the mediocre. And as soon as they're out of the military, they're the ones starting the companies with the battalion name and starting the pages with the battalion, everything. Now they literally turn that beret that they despised into their identity. Well, okay, dude, I guess you never really wanted to be a ranger. You just wanted to be a ranger veteran.
Yeah.
Cool. So, but then I think but for the rest of us, one of the hardest things is just pandering. Like, I don't want someone to be like, oh, life is so bad for you. I'm so sorry that you've been distraught. It's like, get out of my way. Just get out of my way. Stop. If you work for HR, leave. Just quit.
Yeah.
So just quit.
Yeah. No. I think that for a lot of vets in general, for whatever reason, they feel like the world owes them something when they get out, or they are constantly living in the infamous good old days, like, oh, well, back when I was in, or, they're constantly living in the past, and they're allowing what they did to dictate where and what they want to be in the future versus living here in the now and trying to create positive change for themselves for a better tomorrow. And I think that's kind of the bigger issue at hand. And that's not to say, you can't reminisce every now and again, but intentionally reminiscing and staying there and not creating any positive forward momentum is, I think, the bigger issue at hand for a lot of vets, because a lot of vets get out and they're used to that camaraderie. I think a lot of people end up getting out and they actually shouldn't have, because, they actually need the micromanaging. They need to know they're getting paid on the 1st and the 15th. They, need that order and that discipline. It's the same thing where I think that I think a lot of bigger companies and corporations would have better morale in their company and better retention if after a certain period of time, 12 months, 18 months, whatever, that the employees showed good work ethic, that they then gave them the option to work remotely if they wanted to. And some people do work better remotely. I hated working in an office. I hated being micromanaged. I hated people over my shoulder. I hated people interrupting me in my little cubicle, which I also hated. There was a lot of hate, as you can tell. But a lot of people thrive, actually, in the opposite. People thrive off of the workforce cubicle environment. During the past 3 years, people lost it having to work by themselves or work remotely, whereas other people ended up thriving on it, and then those same people ended up giving their 2-week notice and they started their own company. And so I think it all works out for the better. But I think a lot of these vets that say they hated the military actually need it. They need it for that structure.
Is it you or is it me?
Yeah.
Maybe you just weren't mature enough to see that that's exactly where you're supposed to be. Yeah. But it's too late now because you got out. So good luck, bud. Which is a horrible thing. It's like a horrible truth that you got to face, but sometimes you do have to face it. Yeah. If you make bad decisions in life, you will have to face them. The question isn't if, it will be when. Yeah. And so, okay, and it's better to face them voluntarily than it is to wait for them to ambush you at your doorstep. Yeah. So, it's that easy to and even one step further, that's so easy to say and so hard to do. It's really easy to say it. You will have to face this stuff voluntarily, and if you don't, it will basically ambush you. And like, all this sounds great, but then you're like, okay, cool. I'm still avoiding responsibilities.
Well, that's what you're seeing with 99% of the American population is people having a lack of responsibility for themselves or for their health or whatever. It's all doing this, all pointing the fingers. No, it was his fault or it was his fault. They're not. Instead, whose fault it is you look in the mirror, that's whose fault it is, whether it's for the good or for the bad. As soon as you accept everything in your life is in some form or version your fault, the sooner you accept that, I personally think the easier, or not easier, but I guess the easier your life ends up being in the long run. But that's the most difficult thing, is people taking responsibility for themselves, because it's very easy to point fingers and misdirect and say, oh, well, I'm not where I want to be because of my boss or because of this person or this and that. But as soon as you're like, yep, I messed up, I take the L, now I got to fix it. I think that's one of the most courageous acts a human can do in any form of modern society, is taking that responsibility, because if you don't, it's just all chaos, which again is what you're currently seeing in some form or another.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know whether it's the dust or the season. Like, my body wants to sneeze soon, so
That's okay.
Oh, it's just annoying. So let's drill down into this concept of responsibility. You started with it seems like a majority or some part of our population. Maybe it's the majority, maybe it's a controlling minority who at this point in time it really doesn't matter. Seems to have embraced a radical rejection of responsibility.
Yes.
And you said, like, I don't know. Do you think that's by will? Do you think that's by choice or by nature? I guess is that nature or nurture? Do you want to go into John Locke in the Enlightenment?
I honestly think it's being allowed by nature, being nature in the context of society, allowing that. I really think that where we're currently at is due to a lack of having a defined line, whatever that line may be. If everything is gray and there's no definitive points, whether and again, not politics, just in a far left direction, far right direction. If there's no end point and everything is gray, then that, I think, is where the biggest issues are. I feel like humans thrive off of having some type of binary line, having some type of hard point as to go to, whether it be religion, whether it be politics, whether it be sexuality, whether it be gender-based, whatever it is. If you take that away and everything is just gray and just whatever you want to be, I think that is in itself a giant lack of responsibility as a whole, or just simple avoidance, which obviously is a lack of responsibility. And I think that has been allowed by our culture in this context, being nature. Like my parents never raised me in that way, compared to nurture. And I don't, it may also be the current generation of parents, nurturing their children in a way that allows this behavior. But as for me, as for you, I'm sure with the generational gap with our parents, I was always raised to, take responsibility, to be respectful, to, just be a good human, and that's not what we're seeing currently. I don't know where and or when it occurred. I don't think you can really fixate a hard date and time specifically, but I do feel like, we have quote unquote fallen off the wagon, so to speak. If only my grandfather, who fought in World War II, could currently see where we're currently at, he would just be appalled, or even all these people that are currently, protesting about people having, free ability to do what they want to do to their body, so to speak, or to think a different way, that are against that. It's like, you understand that if you trace your ancestry back far enough, you probably had an ancestor that came over here on the Mayflower to get away from England in order to have those freedoms. And now you're quite literally going against what your bloodline fought in order to carry your genes on here to today. You can be against violence and against whatever you want, but again, if you trace your line back far enough, I can guarantee you one of your great kin probably beat somebody in the head with a rock in order to retrieve a piece of meat or food to bring back to their tribe. But people have just so easily forgotten that. That's not to say we need to live like savages and cavemen, but we also need to have a perspective as to, what being in this sense, a free American really means.
So I've got 3 notes on that one. One of them is nature versus nurture. Second one is tracing history and how we understand history. And then the third one is violence and its appropriate location. And so the first one being nature versus nurture from Rousseau is a little bit of a divide between nature being it's not what is taught in you. It's what's like, it's nature, it's human nature. So maybe like the difference between nature and nurture in the Rousseauian sense is nature is something that is part of you at birth, and nurture is something that your parents, your society, or your surroundings train you to do. Yeah. So learning how to build a fire for human beings is nurture. Yeah. That's for sure. Yeah. But nature is, nature would be something like the will to live for a while, or food, or, like you have your nature is a lot more. It's regardless of society. You would have that. If there was no society, it's sort of not prima facie. Maybe it's prima facie. It's a priori. In like logic-esque terms, it'd be almost like a priori versus a posteriori. And so, like, I can understand how society itself, what the world that we live in, and I have a hard time using the word society because it so quickly descends into nihilism. Yeah, for sure. Society, right? Yeah, because and I wonder how much and how often we sort of abdicate responsibility by saying everyone's abdicating responsibility. No one's taking responsibility in the United States, but neither am I. But they're doing it way worse, kind of thing. Yeah, and so when it comes to this format you're referring to as a lack of responsibility. I know you and I have talked about it before, but I want to hear that again and hear that deeper as far as like, what do you mean by a lack of responsibility, and what does it look like? What's an example of what it might look like, and maybe an example of what the opposite or what taking responsibility looks like? Because it sounds nice, but it needs a deeper, closer touch.
Yeah, so I mean, like, more or less a lack of responsibility, meaning to. Well, let's keep it simple, in meaning to the individual, the self. So instead of taking responsibility for, say, your health, right? Instead of taking the basic steps to be a healthier person, to, I think, having basic common sense, which, as we all know, common sense isn't so common anymore, but being like, after you eat, say, a bag of Doritos, and then the next day you wake up with an uneasy stomach and you just feel ill and gross and you have gastric problems, etc. Instead of pausing and being like, maybe I shouldn't eat that anymore. Remove that from the diet. Maybe replace it with something better and see if it changes something. They go, that's weird. And then they go back to eating the same bag of Doritos. So there's no common sense when it comes to cause and effect, per se. So lacking the responsibility for positive change in their health, or instead outsourcing their health to somebody that went to a specific college and has a fancy diploma on the wall. Now, with that said, I understand that you can't just will yourself to fix your body and rub some crystals on a open fracture, broken arm, right? I understand where allopathic medicine has its place, but I really think that a lot of people in today's modern society have outsourced their basic autonomy for their health, more specifically their mental health, to somebody who has never walked a day in their shoes. So they have any uneasiness, they immediately run to the doctor, the ER room, to say, oh, I have this symptom and this symptom. And then the doctor gives a magic cure. Here's your medication. Go pick it up at the pharmacy. It'll all be well. Okay. So that's one where when it comes to somebody's personal health, we've outsourced it. So lacking responsibility to living a healthier lifestyle. And that doesn't mean you need to be a, national CrossFit level athlete. But if you're literally getting out of breath walking up a flight of stairs, then maybe you should seriously look at changing something significant in your life. And then the second, and what most has the most commonality to my way of life, is safety, physical safety. So instead of accepting the fact that the world can be a dangerous place and there are bad people out there, and taking the steps necessary to preserve your life and your loved one's life, we outsource it to, again, somebody in uniform that, depending on where you live, is, if you live in the city, maybe, especially nowadays with the significant drop in law enforcement officers that are working nowadays, you're usually 20, 30 minutes out. That's probably on the light side. If you're living out here in the sticks like me, 45 minutes an hour, and if you get struck in a major artery, femoral, radial, etc., you're going to bleed out in 30 seconds tops without any immediate medical attention. And I think that because people have really lost that connection with how brutal humans can actually be, whether that be from upbringing, if you lived in a nice area and you lived a nice life and you didn't really see or had a hard contrast in how humans can be, that's where I really think the benefit of me serving in the military really opened my eyes to going overseas and seeing how bad humans can be. I actually look at that as a positive outlook in my life to really show me and be grateful for what I have on a day-to-day basis. But whether you grew up in a good life or not, people have kind of removed themselves or have said, oh, well, that'll never happen to me, or, oh, that happened on the other side of town, or whatever it may be. And I think that's honestly because if they admitted to themselves that, as my motto states, no one is literally coming to save you, if they accept that wholeheartedly, now they have to wholeheartedly accept the fact that they are the ones in charge. And for most people, that is absolutely terrifying, to think that they have to be the ones in charge for their own safety.
So you talked an awful lot about responsibility there, and taking responsibility for your own actions and your own connections. And here's the thing that I have with responsibility, that this is probably my one gripe against the situation, is responsibility to what? Because in some ways, it absolutely makes sense. I have responsibility to my wife. Yeah. I have a responsibility to, and I've talked about this on another show, how responsibilities and rights are nailed together so firmly that if you split them in half, you're basically splitting an atom. Yeah. So, if you have a right to life, that life is your responsibility. If I have children, I am responsible for them in a way that's different than if I have an employee. Responsibility is a tricky word. And when I'm aiming at responsibility to what, there's this, you alluded to this earlier about how we don't have something, there's a missing thing that is sometimes referred to as a religion, sometimes referred to as a common ground or something that I think it's easy to say that you can come to the conclusion at least the United States and Western world, we don't have a unified worldview. We don't have a mission to strive for. We're not pursuing anything as a community or a culture. In fact, if we are, the things that our culture is pursuing are superficial at best. There is nothing more. It's not that there's nothing more, but you look at just the conflicts that are happening over the transgender kind of worldview, and or the transgender perspective is that like the issue that you're having is that we are arguing over, or what is being sort of forced as a cultural milieu is that the most shallow element of who you are, what you look like and want to sound like, is that which defines you, as opposed to that which makes you a human being and that which makes you a person. It's like, but that is being enforced as if it was a religion, as if it was like the caricature of the Catholic Church circa 700 AD going, you will not read the Bible or you will die. And it's like, that's what I don't think that there's a lack of religion in the United States. And now my, it's not a phase mom hair is getting in the way.
No, I completely feel you. And you said it multiple times in that little soundbite, forced. And that's what I had the biggest issue with. Like, do whatever you want to do, man. Like, I don't care. Just as long as it doesn't affect me or my family in any type of negative manner, do what you want to do. But the fact of how hard it is being like just jammed down all of our throats, and the fact that you can't say anything against it or this or that, that's what I have the biggest problem with. And again, I don't necessarily know where that stemmed from, other than the fact that I honestly think it's, as it's been said in the past, especially the past couple of years, it's some type of signaling. It's being signaled by, I think, the group of individuals in our culture that are one of the most of the minority groups that want to have some type of voice, that feel the most repressed for some reason, and now they have a voice, and now it's just gaining steam significantly. And when it comes to what I was talking about before, kind of backtracking here with responsibility, like true, that you don't necessarily have to take a responsibility for your life, right? Like, no one says that you can't just push the end button, so to speak, and just not live anymore, right? Like, no one's saying that you have to continue living. But for me, and for a lot of people that are in my circle, I believe responsibility being that if we don't take responsibility for ourselves to become, even if it's just 1% better than you were the day before, then what's the point of living? Like, what's the point of, and if I personally think if you're not doing that, and even, like I said, just 1%, if you're not doing that, then that's not living. That's just existing. That's just you counting down the days until you're eventually decayed enough to a point where someone's gonna have to eventually pull the plug for you because you're gonna be hooked up to a machine. And that's not a way of life. That isn't a way of life. That isn't some way that I would want to live. And that's why I live the way that I live. That's why I do jujitsu 3 days a week. That's why I work out. That's why I submerge myself in ice cold water, because I feel a need to do that in order to feel alive. And I feel like people that don't do that, people that sit on the couch, that, do the 9 to 5 grind, quote unquote grind, then they come home and they throw in their microwavable dinner and they sit on the couch and they watch their favorite reality TV show, and then they rinse and repeat that cycle indefinitely until they hopefully somehow make it to retirement. Like, that's not living for me. That's just you just being another cog in the wheel, as far as I'm concerned. And I feel like the people that are involved in the most recent trend of being in this minority group are those people, the people that really have no purpose or no responsibility, but now they see an attraction to be able to have a voice now, and now they have a voice, and now it's gaining traction, and now it's the, oh, woe is me, I am, I'm the most, hurt group, or I don't have a voice, or this or that, and you need to be on my side, or however you want to word it.
Oppression is a powerful. Oppression as a term, like claimed oppression, is a very powerful tool.
Yes.
It's a very powerful weapon. Yeah. And if you don't have the ethical prerequisites or if you don't have the moral prerequisites not to take advantage of a scenario, or if you're convinced by arguments like there is no truth but power, then you lack the moral fiber necessary for engaging in those kind of conversations. I guess is one way of saying it. You lack the moral prerequisites is the only word that I can think of. Like, if you're convinced by the argument that there is no truth but power, there's something in you that's missing, or that's broken, and that because it's like no one actually believes that metaphysically. They only believe it because it's a means to an end.
Yeah.
There is, like, you can look at the world. It's the same thing that you get with the argument that comes like history is written by the victor. Like, technically, no, it's not. History is written by people. We just tend to have the accounts that are produced by the victors. And for some reasons, that's a good thing. And for some reasons, it's a questionable thing. But it's extremely cynical and nihilistic to assume that all of human history is one giant conspiracy theory directed by all of the people who have ever accomplished or been reigned victorious in a conflict between people. And just to think, because you won, you must be lying or hiding something. Like the egotistical narcissism necessary to hold that worldview is fundamentally pretty impressive. That you have to be that, like that. It's the idea, and there's this it's this idea. It's ridiculous. The idea that you think that, oh, the history is written by the victor. Now I'm smart and witty. It's like, you might actually still be illiterate, and that's just the end case of it. But fine. So I digress. So I want to. We keep working on this subject, and this is one of those things where I think is like the hard subject, and that is. I think when you take, or you said, you gave an example of, your 9-to-5 guy who works and lives on a couch and doesn't do anything. And I've come to the opinion lately that the propaganda, let's call it propaganda, the propaganda of the 1980s, the Married with Children style television show where the father works his job, but other than that is just kind of a slob. Yeah. And his daughter's probably probably loose, and his son's probably a dweeb. This kind of generic 1980s, early 1990s family-esque sitcom. I can understand that, but I can understand that as like a form of like propaganda. And I don't want to go too far into it because like the whole propaganda speech just gets into hypotheticals on hypotheticals. But what I can do is I can look at, let's just talk about the gun culture, is the how in many, when you're in the military, you typically have the why or the what you have to do, and it's all about figuring out the how. How do I reach the next rank? How do I pass Ranger School? How do I complete the mission? How do I direct the subject? For people outside of the military, it's quite literally the opposite. It's what and why. This is why we spend so much time arguing about CQB versus urban recce and 14.5 inch barrel versus 11.2, and you're like, I don't think that it needs to be beaten to death so much. But it's not about the gear, because I'm not making that argument again. There's a show I did that on a solo show already. But the point that it really stands out for me is that like I can tell you how to really get good at competition shooting or get good at shooting, but I can't tell you why or what it's for or where you're going to go. And so sometimes I think we resort to like disaster scenarios, because your example of the guy your example of the police is a really clean one. It's a really clean one in the sense of like, statistically, technically speaking, yes, if I call the cops now, it's probably going to be 15 minutes before they get here, and I know enough about violence to know that I'm going to die in less than 15 minutes if I have a sucking chest wound kind of thing, right? Yeah. But I can know the mechanics of that, but that does not solve the problem of responsibility, because I could very well not Pelosi myself and hire an entire security team to stand outside my door, but I don't have the money to do that. And so I could figure out how to do the money. And all of this stuff includes a why and a direction I'm aiming at. The training, there's enough training out there. I mean, we have room for more instructors? It's not, I haven't looked at the numbers, but it's not about, like you said, you almost described it as your getting better is the reason to live. And I think that guy who lives on the couch isn't missing out on the why, on the what. He hasn't either committed to or figured out the why. He has nothing he wants to live for. So,
and that's a very nihilistic existence, as far as I'm concerned. Like, if you have no why and no purpose, then like, what's the point of existing another day? Like, I feel like those same people probably have some type of ego or identity tied with whether it's their job. Like, I am the lawyer, I am the car salesman, I am the accountant, whatever it is. I like my nice watches, or I like my nice shoes, or I like my nice materialistic things. And if for me, like, I don't really see that as a purpose, because those are just immaterial things that serve no purpose outside of making your ego feel better, that you can afford the nice car or the nice things, or that you are whatever your job is. Like, if you were to remove those things, and I say that to the same people that you brought up that example with, that have the identity with the gun culture, that, I have, the cry pants and the chest rig and, the 10.5 and the 11.3 or the 12.7, or I have I have a John Wick style setup. And I'm like, cool. If you were to remove all those things were to magically disappear, what are you as a person? What are you as an individual? What worth can you give to your friends, to your family, to your loved ones, whatever it may be? That's what I think is the really hard question for a lot of people to answer. For me, because I'm a dad, I'm a dad of 3 kids, and I have a wife and all that. For me, I always want to be capable. I want to be capable as a father, whether it be from a mentor standpoint to mentor the next generation of human beings, whether it be physically, like, I don't want to be the dad that can't keep up with his kid, chase around the house because I'm about to pass over from a heart attack. And also just simply intellectually. Like, that's why I have such a passion for writing, because, as I'm sure with you, you've noticed a lot of people in today's society, you read some stuff on social media and you're like, how do these people even pass grade school? They can't even formulate a sentence or use correct punctuation, or they can't even create quality discourse like you and I are having now without allowing emotion to get in the way. And then they stamp their feet like a toddler and, run away, or, don't talk any further, bro, because I see red. I don't need training because I just see red, bro. Like one of those sort of things.
Yeah, well, that's a self-correcting error. Like, if you're that guy, if like I know, yeah. I mean, it's a self-correcting error, and we've talked about this stuff before. Like, even though it's the year 2022, year of our Lord, we've seen a lot of interesting, let's just call it Midwest interesting. For those who are listening from the Midwest, you know what I mean. When you say, "Oh, that's interesting in Minnesota," it's not a compliment. I guarantee you, it's not a compliment. But well, with very, very few exceptions. But we've seen so many things happen where it's like, you know what? I'm very thankful for something right now, is that all the people who are good at violence are not participating in it. There's a lot of people, there's plenty. If you go into the right places, you will find a lot of violence, and you'll be utterly thankful that the people who are doing it are not good at it. They're not skilled in their craft, let's say. And the people who are I would imagine the people who are both skilled in the craft and also performing it, most people don't know about. They have no idea what's going on. No idea who's doing what, where, and quite frankly, your opinion on the subject is sometimes not really that great. Like, I don't know where I'm at. I don't know where all the people in the world are doing all the things. But going back into the societal issue, you keep addressing this need for like a mission and a direction. And I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
This is why I'm not a libertarian. This is the one thing where like I have some issue that maybe it's not a libertarian. This is where I have issues with sort of gun culture libertarian. Like, no, I don't think you can do whatever you want. I really don't. I do not believe in a world where if you do what you want to do and I do what I want to do, we can all just get along. The world will be happy. Like, I don't believe in that. I actually don't, because I think that sort of belief system, that form of libertarianism. Now, I make a distinction between Robert Nozick libertarian and like hippie libertarianism. And Robert Nozick libertarian is a little bit more like minimum necessary government to protect the rights of the individual against both the state and their neighbors. So it's a pretty simple concept. And that's asking what's the purpose of government, not what's the purpose of life. And so when it comes to like libertarianism, culturally speaking, no, I'm not a libertarian. I have some issues with it that have grown out of the years. One of them is I think that libertarianism degrades into that form of libertarianism degrades into some sort of multiculturalism, which just kind of loses the habit, let's not hurt each other and just say, why can't we be friends? Which the only way that can function is if you have an oppressive state that operates a meta religion that forces everybody to basically follow a set of rules, which then states you can believe whatever you want to believe as long as it has no significance. And there are a couple ways that you could draw it out. If you're allowed to be in a situation, if you and I exist in a world where it's okay for you to do a thing, but not okay for me to do a thing, and we could use, I guess there's a whole manifold level of examples, but if we live in an environment where what I believe to be both right and true is irrelevant, but I'm allowed to believe it. Let's just say, Christianity or any sort of religious structure or any sort of belief structure, and I don't, at all whatsoever, and it has no application to my life. If what we call a religion is functionally reduced to a fashion statement of what box do I sit in on the weekend and what clothing do I wear and what book do I have under the shelf, but it has no correlation to what I understand about reality and my connection to it, then it reduces religion into functionally a fashion statement. And as a result, the only people who can succeed in that society are the people who have rejected, not never found, but completely embraced that masochistic not Manichaeanism, but that masochistic, not masochistic, that almost Machiavellian approach to morality and power. And then all that comes from that is if you start with libertarianism in that format, you end with the tyranny of some sort of meta religion that comes in and that comes in and crushes using the power of the state, because that meta religion joins with the power of the state, which is what we've seen in communism, what we've seen in fascism, what we've seen in all of in despotism, in Louis XIV, in possibly you could say with Napoleon himself, with Lenin and Stalin and all of these great travesties that have traveled through history, has always come when you align the pulpit and the sword and you put them in the same box. So I just got a phone call, but I think we should be good. The only problem with using this computer is that when I get a phone call, it runs through my computer.
Same.
Yeah. Thanks, computer. Now we're having a really good tirade. So I hope I didn't ruin. I hope that you see where I'm coming here, right? I hope that didn't completely derail it.
No,
it's like
no.
I don't think that whatever it means to just be more materialism falls short. And this is we all see this. Like I understand that we have to work our way through it, but the materialistic side of gun culture is fading. And we know it. We're okay with it. It's all good. The amount of people who make the Mark 18 their identity, other than because it's funny, in the interwebs, is decreasing very rapidly. And I'm an optimist here. Gun culture is getting very philosophical very fast. So, because the materialism of Mark 18 make me smart operator is like, good boy. It's a joke. Whereas the people, the number of people who really make their gear their identity seems to be getting smaller.
Well, I also think it also helps because of the rise in the popularity of force-on-force training being more of a thing. You know, like when I first got out of the military in 2010, you were pretty hard-pressed to be able to find open enrollment force-on-force training outside military and law enforcement. You know, the first person that comes to mind that really opened my eyes to everything was a good friend and mentor of mine named Craig Douglas of ShivWorks. His flagship course is called ECQC, or Extreme Close Quarters Concepts, and I think he's been teaching that in the public sector since '08. And at the time, like, no one was taking his classes, and it was he was, barely filling up classes. And now he's like, he puts them out a year in advance. He puts them live and they sell out in like less than an hour, because people are seeing the utility of actually pressure testing your training, not just wearing the cool gear and doing build drills at 3 meters, like actually seeing if my gear and my willingness to survive a violent encounter actually meets up with how it's actually going to go, not just my, as I say, my tactical masturbatory imagining of it, but actually going against another individual who's intentionally trying to stop me from doing that technique, whether it be an escape, whether it be drawing a weapon, whatever it is. Can I actually do it, or am I just fooling myself? And because of the rise in popularity of that, and not just, within 2 arms reach stuff, but also like force-on-force structure work, my good friends over at Core Vision Training out in Washington State, they have a full actual shoot house facility, and it's completely open enrollment. You don't have to be a cop or military to take the courses. They're teaching structure assessment stuff to the everyday law-abiding citizen. And again, they're using airsoft, and the bad guy shoots back. It's not just a paper target in the corner that it's just they're just gonna shoot. Like if you don't work your angles and your corners correctly, you're gonna pay for it. And I think because of that, like you said, a lot of people in the culture are becoming more insightful and more thoughtful as to how they train and who they train with. And of course, there will always be people that will refuse the training and instead, buy into all the drop hype, all the, drop hype shirts, and, pay $40, $50 for a shirt. And then they go into some Facebook group and, they charge 3 times the amount, the whole DEF CON Vans culture, as I like to say, like that sort of thing where people are paying an obscene amount of money for stuff. That will always be there. But
yes, technical difficulties retained. We continue.
Yes.
So we were on the vein of like materialism and this idea of like having the kit is sort of fate. I think that the materialism of the FUDs and the boomers, just as it's kind of disintegrating in the world outside of gun culture, even in gun culture, it's disintegrating. Now, I will say, I don't have a problem with like the hype culture. Like I don't have an issue with it. The whole forward observations corner of things, forward observations, DEF CON Vans. Like I don't have any issue with it because it has its place. Like I understand it, but no one's looking at DEF CON Vans and thinking that it makes you run 10% faster, or whether you've got an LBT carrier and whatever. It's like, I get it that there is the trendy kit. Don't get me wrong. Like I don't have a pair of DEF CON Vans, but I wouldn't mind having one. Because because to me it's like it's cool, it's mine. But as long as I'm not substituting that for time training on the range, time practicing on like doing the thing, right? Doing the thing, learning, having a community, being a part of something. And that's what I'm optimistic about it, is that like the materialism of the contemporary gun culture is actually pretty comical, because it's like, do you have a forward observations dad hat? Or do you have like, are you part of this kind of thing? As opposed to like, oh, do you have like a $2,000 1911 that also doesn't work? I would much rather have forward observations materialism than like Kimber materialism, or like I've got 10 1911s and 2 of them function.
It's true, but sometimes, and it's going to be a commonplace regardless, is sometimes people within the drop hype culture spend so much money on that shit that they then don't have money to, actually go to the training. Which that is a problem, because now you're a liability and not an asset to yourself and those that you love. If you can balance both, just like I tell new shooters all the time, because the most common question I get from new shooters, specifically with a pistol, is, of course, should I get a dot or should I not? And I always tell students that if you can afford both training, whatever your training is considered, like I accept the fact that for the average individual, it's very unlikely you're going to be able to afford to train with a reputable teacher every month. That's just unrealistic, right? But we'll say practicing on your own, after you take formal training, right? If you're practicing on your own without formal training, you're unintentionally and potentially building bad habits. That's why I personally believe dry fire is both a double-edged sword, right? If you have formal training from a reputable individual, you can then dry fire those skills that you learn, because you know what correct is and what is not correct. If you've never had any formal training and you're just mimicking stuff that you think is correct in dry fire, now you're just ingraining bad habits that now you potentially have to work out of when and if you eventually go to, actual training. So I always tell people, if you can afford both, if you can afford to practice, whatever your practice looks like, whether it's once a month, every other week, every single week, whatever, 50 rounds a week, 100 rounds a month, whatever. If you're actually going on the range and putting rounds down range intentionally, you can do that and afford to send your slide away, get it milled, and put a dot on, great. But if you can't, then I will say to stick with your irons and work with what you got. Eventually, yes, you should eventually progress to a dot, because that's just the way of the world. Why would you not use modern technology? If you were to ask me a decade ago, would I put a dot on my carry gun? I probably would have said no, because I didn't trust the technology and what was available at that time. But now, a decade later, like it's the same thing where you're going to be hard pressed for you to come to one of my carbine classes and see somebody not running a dot on their rifle. It's just a common thing. You buy a rifle, you buy an AR, AK, you put a dot or an LVPO on it. That's just a common thing. It's very rare for somebody to intentionally buy a modern sporting rifle and just run irons on it. And that's the current trend I'm seeing with pistols. Especially a lot of companies nowadays are coming with a removable plate that you can just take off. It's already milled and just throw a dot on. It's just so that it probably, when I first started doing full time back in 2017. It was probably a 50-50 split in classes. Then it turned 60-40, 70-30, 80-20, and now next year it's probably going to be 90-10. Like it's getting to be very uncommon in pistol classes to see people still running irons. And that's not to say anybody listening that you're going to kill in the streets, you use irons. It's not anything like that. It's just the trend is, with modern technology comes the dot. So it's a modern balance. So again, if you can afford to get the drop pipe culture and get the fog hat and the DEFCON bands and train, cool, awesome. I hope you let me try your shoes on in the seminar. I don't know, but if those same people are then like, oh well, I'm kind of tight on cash, or like, when's the last time you've been to the range? Oh, I don't know, but check out this sweet shirt, the sweet hat. That is what I have the issue with, because the reality is that most students or most people who not only own guns but also own guns and then intentionally practice with them, either by themselves practice or actually go to training, they make up to 0.5% to maybe a full 1% of people who own guns in this country, which is a terrifying statistic. People think that just by owning guns and having them in their house, they're going to be able to magically produce these life-saving skills on the worst day of their life. And I always look at the fact of, are you an asset to those around you, your community, your loved ones, yourself, or are you a liability? And if you're buying that, whether it be gear, guns, whatever, and you're not going out and putting in the work, and you carry a loaded gun in public space, that I have a problem with.
When you're saying you have, I'm actually making sure to jump because there are like social faux pas, that kind of thing. When you say you have a problem with, it's like, it's obviously not like a legal issue. And don't get me wrong, like this is a flat out, like, I think I understand what you're saying in the sense of, you have a problem with it, isn't like, that's not a very responsible way to approach the thing that you're supposedly doing.
Yes.
It's not like there should be somebody coming in to manage you and run your time.
No, that's why,
because I think there's a bit,
that's why I have a double-edged sword view on constitutional carry. Like New Hampshire, where I live, is constitutional carry, which I think is great. It's your right as an American to own guns. That's great. But again, if you're going to own them and carry them specifically, it's also your responsibility to go out there and get the training. Now, what that looks like, that's the gray area. That's subjective to you, your level of autonomy, where you think your skill level is at. But I'm also not in the mindset of state mandated training, because I've lived in those states and I've had students who lived in those states. And I can tell you the quote unquote standards they have isn't a standard. It's just something that they can check off in a box. The money goes to the state just so the state can get money, and the state can go, hey, see, these people went through this training and they're trained now. And that's just not the case. So I believe in constitutional carry, but I also believe like it's also going to be your responsibility. And as we know, unfortunately, humans are inherently lazy. So that therein lies the issue.
Yeah, I get it. Like it's a little bit anything that you think is bad, the state can make worse, or anything that you think is bad, add bureaucracy and it'll get worse. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, there's an issue of untrained people. Let's get the state involved. You know what happens? You have less trained people who now think they're trained. So, like,
I'm the government, I'm here to help.
Yeah, no, thank you. What he said.
Yeah.
So I understand that in a concept. Now in application, when it comes to the population and being untrained, I still stick to like that's a self-correcting error. Yeah. Like if you're going to be the person, like it is in some sense, it is like, I know the concept of the Darwin Awards have been around for a while. We'll give Brandon Herrera some credit for monetizing the joke, but we'll have to give him some credit for monetizing the joke, and good for him too. Like, but the point that I'm saying is that is one of the things about gun culture, is that like a lot of what we do is a self-correcting error. It really is. If you jump out of the plane without a parachute, you might be cool for about 30 minutes or 30 seconds or whatever it is. But hey, it's no one's problem but the insurance company, and they're not people either. So who cares?
It's true, but the issue that I have with it may or may not be self-correcting is the fact that if you pull that gun in a situation, untrained person, now you're just spraying. Now you're hurting somebody else's life that just happened to be there, wrong place, wrong time, and now we have a collateral damage issue. So yes, it's self-correcting in the fact of you pull a gun and then and it's just you're in a dark alley, you have a definitive backstop, there's no non-shoots around you, and you pull the gun and the guys just beat the shit out of you and steal your gun. Yeah, that's self-correcting. But if you're pulling it because you have an untested level of confidence and you perceive that I'm a good shooter, and you pull the gun out in public space, say a mall, food court, whatever, and you just start blazing, now therein lies the issue. Yeah, no,
I certainly agree with you there. I'm not trying to diminish the issue of the tragedy, I guess. The short answer is like the tragedy. If you look at the tragedy that happens in war happens to the people who never wanted to be there in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's not inconsistent across time. it's so the violence that happens in the world. It is what it is. The tragedy is it's when it comes for the innocent, and although there's another question to be had there, but yeah, I don't want to turn this into like arguing the nuance of when a person has responsibility.
Yeah,
I think generally speaking in firearms culture, like if you're that guy who doesn't, if you're that guy, you will be hated. You will find yourself on the fringes of culture, and no, they're not gatekeeping you, because if you're a turd and you're like, if that's who you are, like, you're not being gatekept, dude. You're just kind of an asshole, because you're sort of you're trying to be a part of a community that values responsibility while refusing to take responsibility for your own actions and choices. And that is not gatekeeping. That is something completely different. So
most people that I know that have friends that are like that have all the gear, but have every excuse to train, like they intentionally just berate them nonstop until they eventually stop being their friend, or they actually take the steps to becoming better and they actually come to a class. So yeah, I completely agree with you on that end.
So you talked about earlier about how training has changed, and I agree. This is something I'm encouraged by, and I think it's a good thing. Is like we even had a Ryan training group on. So you guys,
they're good friends with the Core Vision guys, and have gone out to Core Vision and done like collaborative stuff with them. So
yeah, and there is. I don't want to say that. Here's another possible observation: is that the kind of the era of Jeff Cooper, no relation, had really sort of created little empires. You had, the gun sight group, and they were pioneering. So there's a lot of credit to be given to these characters.
Oh, for sure.
Right. So like, let's make a really clear example. I've read some of Jeff Cooper's books. In how to ride, shoot straight, and speak the truth, he makes the most fuddly-dudley arguments that you can find regarding firearm selection and caliber. Like, if everyone lived in a caricature, not a real, but a caricature of a Jeff Cooper world, we would all have bolt-action scout rifles and 308 with 1911s. That would be the meta in American gun culture. But so, like, I can read his work and recognize, I know the world he was in at this time. He did not like the fact that the M9 had like 3 safeties on it. Okay, fine. That world has changed.
Yes.
The world has changed now, where like the industry standard is like a BCM AR-15 with either a red dot of some sort, most likely not actually an aimpoint T1 or T2, and a light that's probably a mod light, so a decent light, a moderate red dot, a decent carbine, and then a Glock 19 that's probably got a red dot on it. Like that is if you want to be as milk toast as you can. Yep. BCM not negative, but like a Vortex Spark Solar on a BCM 14.5 pin to 16 with a mod light light on it, and then a Glock 19 Gen 5 MOS with some sort of red dot on it. Boom, dude. That's you are the Jeff Cooper of today.
Yeah.
So the point that I'm saying is that like, and I know this line has gone on for too long, but the training environment of our day of 2022 is very different than the training environment in 2010, which is very different from the training environment of 1990. And the progression has been more instructors, more courses, more course types, and more expanse in how those courses are taught.
Yes.
CQB courses was not a thing in 2010. And I can almost guarantee you, if somebody isn't already in the works, somebody's making a Ranger School-esque patrol-based operations field training course for gun culture right now, and they're putting together.
Oh yeah, there's already been people that you pay like over $1,200, $1,500 for like an immersive 5 days or whatever to basically be treated like a guy going through an SF pipeline. So that already exists. That's for people that just want to be beat to shit for 5 days straight, I guess. I don't, that have never been in the military, that just want that, like, cool. But yeah, that's,
I'm not talking about a rite of passage course. I'm not talking about a rite of passage course. I'm talking about like a patrol base operations.
Okay.
Like a field, like how to set up an ambush, how to set up react to contact, break contact, react to ambush near far, knockout bunker, knockout trench. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then like how to set up a patrol base with your little triangle of death and your cool. Yeah. Now, not Private Johnson. I know you're not a private, but now go set up the claymore, and he like low crawls into somebody's cornfield, and he's like, okay, click.
Yep. So then he goes. Then you have to go make him burn a shitter barrel after.
Burn a what?
Burn a shitter barrel after. Throw some gasoline on it. Burn the.
Never did that. No, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Like doing your business when you're on a patrol base, you gotta burn the business like they used to do in Vietnam. No, never did that.
No, you don't burn it because that creates heat and light, and then people know it's there. You just dig a damn hole, or you poop in the river.
At the bigger bases, when you're out at a smaller, super small patrol base, yes, yeah. Sorry, joke was I'm talking completely about missed.
Yeah, okay, so this is Marine Corps versus Ranger problem because for me a patrol base is like you're literally you're backpacking. So you're carrying everything with you. You hope you don't have the SAW or the 249, which they're lighter now, so who cares? But and this is where it's like ranging. It's like the kind of fusion of it's like the fusion of a movement to contact type maneuver and a long range reconnaissance. So you got a fighting unit that's moving through an area, and it became famous in it really Merrill's Marauders was kind of the thing that made Rangers at that time because you had Point du Hoc and then whatever. But it's this idea where you've got somewhere between 30-ish dudes, somewhere around 20, upper 20s to lower or mid 30s. You're taking about 30 dudes, maybe as many as 50. And you're moving through an occupied territory. And what you do is in Ranger School is in the morning, you plan your mission, you do your mission during the day, and then you move to your next patrol base. So, I might be on this mountaintop. We're going to do an ambush down here, and then I'm going to move to this mountaintop. And then when I get to that mountain, not even the mountaintop, because you don't want to silhouette yourself too much. But you sit in the shadow of the mountain and you set up a patrol base, which is basically a bunch of people who put their backpacks down and set up. It's like a hive formation where how do you rotate everyone? How does everyone in the platoon have opportunities to eat, sleep, and maintain their equipment and get ready for the next day's operations while the leadership is planning for the next day's operations, the next series of events, or when they're going to do a resupply or whatever. And so you become basically this mobile fortress that moves around, or this force of dudes that sets up a patrol base. So you don't burn your shit. You just dig a hole because you're not going to be there long.
Fair enough.
But if you're talking about Afghanistan patrol bases, dude, I was bougie. I had other units to do that for me.
Fair enough.
It was a kind of an insulting way of saying it.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised.
It's all right. Hey, we're the Marine Corps. We do more with less, okay? We do more with less.
Yes, this is also true.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's more like we're just too cheap to buy modern equipment, so we get stuff from you guys that's passed down.
Yeah, well, hey, it just rolls downhill. By the time you get it, it's gone from you're probably getting a Colt M4 that was used by Delta in 1999 that went through Ranger Battalion in 2004, which went to the 82nd, which then by the time you're getting it, it's been re-anodized 17 times.
Like the Marine Corps infantry just got built-in ear pro to their helmets probably maybe 4 or 5 years ago finally. So Yeah, like there was no
you're not that far
comms, no
behind.
hearing protection, just just lots of hearing loss when you do your final med checkout. So, and
You
then of
guys
course,
you just
it's not service related. So,
you guys didn't even have like Peltors? Like you didn't even have
no, hell no.
like the muffs? You just ran around with a helmet and like open eared that shit?
Yeah. And I was a saw gunner too, so.
How are you talking right now?
Yeah, tinnitus is a dear friend of mine.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have it, but not nearly as bad. I guess.
Yeah, they give you like these little like rubber, flange plugs that you like that no one ever used, because what you're supposed to do, be like, oh, we're about to get, we just got troops in contact. Hold on, let me. Yeah, not a thing.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I'm sitting here right with like the bougie stuff. I had a dual lead Peltors, one radio for my squad, one radio for my team even, and another radio for the platoon.
Yeah.
And then, which was a little bit of weight to carry, but then with the over ears and the mic, and then when I'm talking, when things are going out of here, if I cue my mic, I can talk to everybody. If somebody's talking on the radio, it prioritizes them. So I can be laying hate with a 249, just like cha 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 cha, and you're like, quoting the Epic of Gilgamesh to me, and I'm going to hear you, and not that kung 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 kung.
Yeah,
kung,
I
kung.
wish. No, it was just a lot of screaming involved in the Marine Corps infantry. Yeah, they didn't plan that out. They didn't really execute too well on that. So.
My grandfather fought in Korea, and he never had ear pro, and he was deaf.
Yeah.
He was pretty deaf when he was older.
Yeah,
He was pretty deaf when he was older, but like he just never thought about it. Like, you guys wear earmuffs, what's wrong with you? And you're like, Grandpa, I know, I get it. You literally are the back when it was hard guy. I get it. You had to you literally low crawled up a mountain in Korea and were a POW for 3 years. So like, I get it. There's nothing I can do that's as cool as you are. But he's like, you guys have night vision? That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you can see in the dark? Like,
it's crazy.
So he got to try out at one point in time in Korea, he supposedly was on a team using some of like the first night vision scopes.
The Starlight stuff.
The Starlight things. Yeah, on like an M1 Garand, and they would just sneak out.
That's crazy. Must have been like a giant, like 20-pound just mechanical box.
I don't know. I still have to eventually I'll get to that, but we're just talking about family stuff now. So let's get back to the meat and potatoes, because we've got about we can probably wrap it up in about 15 minutes.
Cool.
So we've covered a lot of material here, and this has always been the objective for me, is that like I think most of gun culture is in a good place right now. I'm okay with being an optimist. It's easy if you want to go find things to complain about: untrained people, stupid drama, kit argumentation that just goes nowhere. Like, you can definitely find it. But as a whole, if you look at gun culture as a whole, I think we're not only in a good place, but we're moving in a good direction. And it's a good place to be. But the one thing that I think that is a question that could be used addressing, and I don't think it's an easy question to answer, but I want to level it at you because I like how you think, is that you have this community, this culture within gun culture, which has some sort of latent approach to responsibility. It wants to be there. It's trying to figure it out. And you're in an environment where, like, you're not trying to just get the next drip. You're not trying to just get the next multicam black plate carrier or whatever. And I get it, man. Sometimes things are cool, but, and I do not have a gripe against kind of the morale stuff, the patches and the stickers and the shirts, in part because they are what keep my business running. Is that, like, when people hear us have a conversation and they're like, okay, I'm going to jump on, and they rock a redacted shirt and stuff, like that does help keep the lights on. It helps for sure. Me. And so, like, and it allows things like this to happen. So I'm not completely against it, and I would be hypocritical if I said otherwise. That being the case, like, some stuff is just cringy. You know, like some stuff is just there's no better way to say it other than it's like your moto stuff. Like if you're like, oh yeah, till Valhalla, brother. You know, like okay,
Yeah.
that came out of vogue 10 years ago, and it's
Yeah.
okay. You know, and
Yeah.
the brutal reality is trends change. It's okay. Eventually, this, you know, one format will be out of vogue, and that's fine. But we're looking at people who are building, they want to pursue responsibility, and they're trying to figure out, they're trying to kind of navigate the world of training, aiming at training. How do I orient my training to my scenario, and being involved in a community and being an asset versus a liability? What is a way that you think people can articulate and integrate the capacity for violence as a asset, not a liability, to their community? Is that specific enough?
I think so. So you're asking how they can articulate to somebody else why and how violence is important? No?
How they can integrate that in. How they can, maybe in a sort of sense of Jung, how you can integrate the shadow. And this really goes into like the philosophy of violence, is that you and I can paint an infinite number of scenarios where having a certain set of skill sets will be good for the community. You're at a grocery store, active shooter comes in. You're at a mall, suicide bomber comes in. You're at a location, somebody, and most of these scenarios are in reaction to something.
Yeah.
There's a famine, you can hunt a deer. These, you know, like all of these scenarios, one of the challenges that I have with the violence thing is that it seems to always be reactive, whereas there is a certain sense of, I think that if you are training and if you have the humility to be a part of a community, and you are training in order to be able to protect that in itself is a virtue. It doesn't need glory.
Yes.
So
I think on a basic sense, even removing, if we're able to remove it from this example here, even to remove firearms is to be involved in some type of martial art. Specifically for me, what I believe, that martial art being some form from the grappling umbrella, whether that be wrestling, whether it be sambo, whether it be judo, whether it be Jui-Jitsu, some type of martial art where you are going against another opponent, force on force, pressure based. That's not to take away from striking arts, you know, like real karate, Muay Thai, traditional boxing, things like that. But those sports, I personally feel, or those martial arts, not sports, I mean, they are a sport too, but those martial arts, I feel like can only be done for so long until like you get your bell rung enough and you're like, okay, I got enough TBI, like I'm good. With grappling, you know, as long as you have a good training partner and you verbally explain like, hey, these are my injuries, like you can do it well into, you know, a pretty well endured age, so to speak. Like you can do it pretty high up there with being older and be moderately okay. Like obviously you're not going to go full bore against the 20-year-old wrestler, you know, that's just out of college, but you can still have a pretty decent moderate level of skill. And I really think that and the reason that I have a big thing on grappling arts is because it really does hold that humility higher. Like there is humility involved in striking arts, boxing, Muay Thai, etc. But when you're getting smashed by somebody into the mats and you're getting smothered, and you start to learn, like, as long as, like, if I can get my fingers up here by my neck and he can't get that choke all the way, as long as I can get a couple breaths in, I can move an inch and I can create more space and I can get out of there. And I think that by doing those type of specific martial arts, it really helps you develop being comfortable being uncomfortable. You know, like being in these really bad positions and knowing that as long as I can breathe, as long as my arms aren't extended and hyperextended, as long as I have basic body awareness and I know that I'm okay, I can keep inching myself out and get to a better and more superior position. And I think that competitive environment really helps people really not necessarily leave their ego at the door, because that's a really common saying in jiu-jitsu is leave your ego at the door. And the thing is, if you want to be great at it, you really can't leave your ego at the door, because like you need your ego there to invoke that competitive spirit. But if anything, I just say be aware of your ego at the door. You know, don't allow that ego to get the best of you and you end up not tapping and passing out, or getting, you know, your arm hyperextended, you shatter your elbow, or whatever it is. You know, as we say in jiu-jitsu, tap early and tap often, or tap or snap, you know, because like I'm going to only go as hard as you go. Like if you go hard, I'm going to give it right back to you, you know. And it's been said in the past that jiu-jitsu specifically, or really in my opinion any grappling art, is a filter for douchebags, like people that are mean-spirited, like bad people that like are bullies. They don't last long with somebody that's like, if they're like 225 and they get choked out by a dude that's 135 pounds and looks like a nerd, they don't last too long. They might last like one of the beginner classes and you'll never see them again, because they can't put themselves down to that type of level. So I think where Rawls is going is, I think that if people, I always say that it's easier to get fit people. And what I mean by fit, like that's a really like broad, you know, word. What does fit mean? Like, again, the example I used earlier was like, if you get out of breath walking up a flight of stairs, like again, like lay off the McDonald's, maybe have a salad sort of thing, right? So like, it's easier to get fit people, or people that have some type of level of cardiovascular, some type of martial art background, some type of fitness background, and it's easier for them to get into shooting than it is to get, as I say, shooting purists. And what I mean by shooting purists is people that only obsess over the gun, that want the latest and greatest trend, that want all the gear, that train in nothing outside of the gun and believe that the gun is the only solution to the problem. It's more difficult to get them into fitness, whether it be fitness in a gym, fitness in martial arts, etc. So I think you're seeing a lot more of that. You're seeing a lot more people that are into shooting that also, you know, bang the weights at the gym more, or they do some type of martial art because they understand that it helps balance a lot of other things out in their life. Like I can tell you that after a work trip, you know, I'm flying out, you know, on Thursday to go to New Mexico. When I come back, I'm probably going to be all spun up from being in the airport. And the first day I get back and I go to jiu-jitsu, like after I leave that class, I'm just so much more calm and relaxed, which is, most people would think that doesn't make any sense. Why would you get more calm after getting the shit beaten out of you for over an hour? And it's something that you really have to experience. Like I can explain it till I'm blue in the face, but until somebody actually experiences it and sees that, like, I think we all need that intentional, intentional hardness in our life, the things that are difficult, to embrace those and not to avoid them. It actually makes you a better friend, a better father, a better husband, wife, etc. Just by not avoiding the hard things, by actually doing them head on with open arms.
So resilience, and it helps build
Yes.
resilience, but as well as, but I think you're saying there's something more to it, and that's the
Yes.
hard part to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, yeah? So like so I've noticed that, you know, jiu-jitsu, specifically jiu-jitsu, but other forms of the contact sports or contact fighting, ground fighting, ground game, whatever, have become so much more popular, I guess is one way of saying it. So this is kind of a follow-up question, is there's a certain sort of a scenario that I keep seeing kind of pop up as maybe it's a desired thing, and it's a combination of community, training, and the culture, is that going to a shooting course is expensive. There's just no way around it. It's not cheap. right? A decent course will probably cost about the same price as buying a handgun.
Yeah.
If you're counting the course and the ammunition, you're probably looking at about the price of a handgun.
Yeah.
Training at a jiu-jitsu gym is not a cheap approach, right? I don't believe, if I'm not mistaken, I've never heard of their, like, you can find a gym membership where it's like $10 a month. You can. I don't know if I can say that same thing with the jiu-jitsu gym where it's like it's $10 a month to go to be, you know. So
no, you're looking at these like you know, depending on where you live, like obviously the more rural you get, the cheaper it's going to be. If you try to go jiu-jitsu like in Florida or California, you know, like the hive of jiu-jitsu where all the Brazilians are, then, and it's like a legitimate like Gracie school, then yeah, you're looking at significant, like $200-$400 a month, you know, depending on, like I said, the gym and the lineage and all that sort of stuff. So yeah.
So the point that I'm saying is this ideal. There seems to be an ideal that's an unstated ideal within gun culture, and I'll break that window and say the unstated ideal within gun culture is that you and 3 to 5 of your friends all have a gang that hangs out together, trains together, shoots together, does things together. You talk gear, and one guy's a sniper, and one guy's a this, and one guy's a that, and you have this like kind of this like weird meta story that's so common, and it's and at the end of the day, you know, it's as the meme goes, it turns out that friendship was the true blank. And you know what I mean? Like the true, it turns out friendship was the true journey, or like, you know, friendship was the true culture, or whatever, you know, insert anime meme joke here. But the point that I'm saying with it is that, like, so then what they'll do is they'll get together, and because not all of them, they cannot necessarily afford to pay for the training, they'll try to supplement it amongst themselves, and they'll
for sure.
You know, like, and there's a virtue to this, and sometimes there's a guy who's a part of the team who is a veteran of a special operations community that has more experience in this area, so he helps teach CQB, and you got this, that, and the other. And there's a certain amount of skill and that can be attained from that group, but it's not skill that's the primary asset. It's actually the group. The fact that they have community together, and let's not forget that part. There's examples of people trying to do it within gun culture. Can you do that same thing with BJJ? Can you have 4 dudes who know very little to nothing about jiu-jitsu, hang out once a week and wrestle and you know, spar on the floor, and then over an amount of time come to some sort of conclusion? Or would you say that they should probably aim towards getting a membership at a gym?
Well, I mean, you could, but then when you go against a skilled, like if you eventually go to a jiu-jitsu gym, you may or may not see that the shit you've been practicing for the past 5 years may have all been for nothing. It's the same thing can be said for shooting. You know, like you train with your buddies, and then you finally save enough cash to finally go to training, and then you realize that for the past 3, 4, 5 years you've been doing reps wrong, or you finally go to, say, a competitive USPSA shooting match, and then you just get hosed by some little Amish girl, so to speak, you know, some unsuspecting person that's also doing the match. You just get hosed, and you're like, wow. And then your entire your life or identity kind of goes down, you know, crumbling, so to speak. So I think it can go either way, whether it's in martial arts or whether it be in shooting. Like I said, I understand training is expensive. Getting a gym membership, it is expensive. But again, as I always say, like if it's important to you, if it's truly a priority for you, you'll find a way. If not, you'll for sure find an excuse. You know, and I understand that, you know, money's tight. People have responsibilities in life, family, mortgage, everything else. But with all those excuses, I still find people that are willing to come out there, put in the work on the range, and become better at the end of the day. and they are returning students. I see the same students every single year whenever I go back to that location, because they see the inherent benefit of going to an actual quality training course. And obviously I'm super grateful for that, because that allows me to live my life the way that I want to and support my family. But I also understand that might be the only training that they get that year. You know, that class may be their annual audit to their personal level of skill. You know, they're not able to go every month, or, you know, I always tell students, you know, best case scenario, you can get once a quarter. If not, you know, maybe once in the beginning of the year, once at the end of the year. And if not, worst case scenario, at the very minimum, once a year, you go out and get some type of formal training. You save up all your shekels and rubles, and you know, you put your money where your mouth is, so to speak. You take in the fact of maybe you have to drive, maybe you have to take fuel into account, you know, staying in a hotel, paying for the tuition, paying for the ammo. Maybe you have to buy new gear for the course, etc. So I take all those things into account, you know, when I explain this to my students when we do the safety brief. You know, I tell them that, you know, money comes and goes, ammo comes and goes, gear comes and goes, but the one thing that I can't ever give them back is their time. You know, time is the most valuable thing that they have, and I want to make sure that by the end of, whether they're staying for a day, whether they're staying for both days, that by the end of it, they're coming out that much more confident, not just in their whatever combative skills, firearm skills, but more confident in their actual skills in themselves as a whole, because that's the most important thing. You can have all the skills in the world with knives and, you know, rifles and pistols and all that, but if you don't have confidence in yourself, in your very being, then all the other stuff is null and void. Just a heavy paperweight that can be used against you, or, as it's been said, you're a holster for somebody else.
Yeah, well, hey, that is a really good place to end off. And cool, I know it really is. Like, there are so many other things that I want to talk to you about, but let's get you on, if you're good with that, let's get you on at another time. Let's have a follow-up conversation to this. So, Ian, thank you very much for that. And you and I have had an opportunity of having a couple conversations in the past, but I really appreciate you coming on the show here. And I look forward to having another talk with you. If this is what I get to do, then I'll carry on. So if people are interested in taking your courses, or they want to read some of your writing, where do they find you?
Sure. My website is RuneNationLLC.com. It's my website. On there, it's pretty easy navigation, whether it comes to courses, course calendar, etc. I'm also on social media, just very lightly, because the overlords there don't like the idea of freedom of speech. So I've been, for the most part, pretty heavily shadow banned on there. I still post, but maybe once a week. Instagram is @RuneNation. Facebook is RuneNation. But most of my writing effort over the past, probably past 2 years now, has gone into, which can also be found on my website under the Thought Crimes tab, something that I call Mind Fuel. It's essentially, it's a $3 paywall, so it's 30 cents a day, and it gathers anywhere and everywhere from philosophy to my personal writings with training. It's basically an open-ended blog that I leave the comments open so students can create discourse on there and not be in fear of, you know, getting tagged for hateful, violent content, etc. Additionally to that, I also have written basically a digital zine that I call Discourse, and that is a one-time $30 fee that basically allows you indefinite access to just kind of essays that I put together during the lovely year of 2020, and kind of compiled them with good high-quality photos and things of that nature. So that's, again, under the Thought Crimes tab on my website as well. And then outside of the training, I also have the I joke and say typical bro vet stuff. I have my signature coffee through a good friend of mine, Spencer. He runs a company called Invicta Coffee, actually out of the Phoenix, Arizona area. Spencer was nice enough to come out to my seminar this past February when I was out there teaching. He's a good shooter. He's a good dude and makes some really good coffee. So if you're a coffee nerd like I am, you should definitely check that. That's on my site. I also have signature beard oil and pomade through another veteran-owned company called Locks Hair Company. They're out of Pennsylvania, and they make all handmade, well, not just male grooming products, but also female stuff, but, you know, soaps, shaving balms, etc., anything revolving around making yourself feel better and smell better. That's on there as well. Then, of course, I have t-shirts. That's on the site, stickers, etc. And then one thing particularly that I do different than a lot of other teachers out there is I offer something called remote coaching. So I had been remote coached from a fitness standpoint for a number of years. And I thought, well, if the same concepts can be applied remotely for fitness related stuff, why couldn't the same concepts be applied for shooting? So I essentially use the same format as I would for plugging in fitness workouts, but instead of plugging in, 5x1 bench press or dumbbell curl, it's presentation from the holster or presentation from the low ready or reloading or target transitioning or movement or whatever. And it's not just dry fire. It's not just live fire. It's completely subjective to the client. I have some clients who do 5 days a week. I have some who do 2 days a week. I have some who do all dry fire. I have some who do live fire once a week, once a month, once every other week. Like I said, it's completely customizable to you and your lifestyle. So if you live in an area where you don't see me coming out, you look on the course calendar and you don't see me coming to that area of the country anytime soon, you can hop on there. It's $80 a month. I do both rifle or pistol. And we can get some conversation going with that, and it just allows you to remain confident in your abilities with having an eye, such as myself, to look at your work. So basically the first couple of weeks we're together, it's considered the baseline week. You record yourself, you upload it through the program, I take it, and I'm able to dissect that video and zoom in, zoom out, draw lines so I can show you your path of presentation. I can do voice overlay so I can explain what I want out of you for the next session while the video is going. And then I send it back through that same app so you can break it down on your own time and then apply it to the next session. So I've had a lot of success with that, especially since 2020 when everyone was kind of locked indoors, unknown what to do. So it's kind of given people an availability to remain capable in their skill set without actually having to travel to the ends of the earth to get to a physical training location. So that, like I said, is on my website too, underneath the training tab.
All right, cool. Well, thank you very much for all that, because I might actually have to jump onto at least that beard oil. But I've known you for a while, man. I've been able to read your writing. I do appreciate it. I've enjoyed your earnesty and your honesty when you're presenting, when you're trying to wrestle through a subject that's difficult to handle.
Absolutely.
And that's so, like, thanks much. I'm really glad to have you on. For those that are on the show, this has been the Redacted Culture Cast. You guys know where to find us. We are here. This is YouTube, Spotify, Apple. I think we're on iHeartRadio. We should be on Rumble by now. And at that point in time, you also can find us at our website at redactedllc.com. That's where you help us stay alive. So thank you very much for your contribution to the merch business. We are here for you. So thank you very much, Ian. I'd love to sit down and have another conversation with you, especially as we get into like independence and sort of independence as more than just a rallying cry for dissidents. So thanks much.
Absolutely, man. Let's do it.
Yep. I'll talk to you soon.